A federal task force just confirmed that Chinese underground banks are washing tens of billions of dollars through American small business accounts every year. And the laundering chain is so deep inside the legitimate banking system that the Treasury cannot promise to dismantle it in this decade. Spirit Airlines, the yellow-tailed low-cost carrier that put 17,000 Americans to work, has just shut down for good. And the two surviving discount carriers will quietly raise fares before Memorial Day. Donald Trump pulled 5,000 soldiers out of Germany, cancelled the planned Tomahawk deployment to Central Europe, and the Pentagon learned about both decisions from his social media post. The longest Department of Homeland Security shutdown on record has finally ended, but the deal explicitly leaves out funding for migrant enforcement, and the new mayor of New York just declared a budget emergency on his second day in office. And in the very last story, a Senate aide told Bloomberg that the British Secret Intelligence Service is privately briefing London allies that the Russian Federation may not survive in its current borders past 2027. Stay with me, because each of these stories has a price tag attached. Let us begin with the story Washington has been quietly trying to keep off the front page. The Department of Justice, working with the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, just published a long-form report confirming what investigative reporters have been writing about for 2 years. Chinese underground banks, operating from 47 American states, are now the largest single laundering channel for Mexican cartel cash inside the continental United States. The mechanism is elegantly simple. A Mexican supplier needs to convert dollars into pesos. A Chinese family in California needs to move yuan out of mainland China without triggering Beijing's currency controls. The Chinese network exchanges the dollars in Los Angeles for yuan inside the People's Republic. The Mexican supplier collects pesos from a separate counter, and no money ever physically crosses a border. Treasury estimates the annual volume at $20 billion at the low end and possibly $50 billion at the high end. Law enforcement has dismantled exactly 4 major rings since 2021. The political consequence is uncomfortable. The same retail networks that moved the cash also lobby in Sacramento, in Albany, and in Houston. Several elected officials have already announced that they will not seek another term. Quick pause. If this opener landed for you, please tap the like button and tell me in the comments which American state you are watching from, because I read every early comment and I genuinely want to know who is here today. The YouTube algorithm only pushes this video to more viewers when those of you watching in the first hour react. Send this clip to that one friend who still believes Treasury controls the dollar end to end, because today's first story shows exactly where that belief breaks. Stay with me, because the next story affects everyone with a credit card and a summer trip planned. Second story, Spirit Airlines has officially shut down operations. The company cancelled all scheduled flights as of last Friday, stranded roughly 40,000 passengers in a single weekend, and notified its 17,000 employees that final paychecks will arrive on a federally mandated schedule rather than the company schedule. Analysts at Cowen and Bernstein agree that the low-cost segment of American aviation is structurally broken. Frontier and Allegiant, the two surviving discount carriers, will raise fares between 8 and 14% before Memorial Day, and the regional pilot shortage will accelerate retirements in 2027. The bigger picture is the visible end of a 30-year pricing experiment in American skies. The deregulation bargain offered budget travel for the urban middle class. Spirit's collapse means that bargain is over for everyone earning under $60,000 a year. Tickets between secondary cities will rise faster than the headline inflation number, and the airports that depended on Spirit volume from Atlantic City to Latrobe will quietly disappear from the route map within 12 months. Third story, Donald Trump cancelled the planned forward deployment of Tomahawk cruise missiles to bases in Central Europe over a single weekend, and the Pentagon learned about it from his social media post. The same announcement included a 5,000-soldier reduction in the American troop presence in Germany and the formal cancellation of an additional rotational brigade. American troop levels in Europe are now back to where they sat in 2022, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The political cover is that the German Chancellor publicly criticized American conduct in the Persian Gulf 2 weeks ago, and the president is, in his own words, applying a price. The actual consequence is that the interim NATO deterrence concept for the eastern flank now has a hole that Berlin will have to fill, and Berlin has neither the missiles nor the political consensus to fill it before 2027. Defense reporters at Reuters and the New York Times put the European bill for backfilling at €75 billion over 4 years, money no European Parliament has yet authorized. Fourth story, and it is the one Capitol Hill is celebrating quietly. The longest Department of Homeland Security shutdown in American history has ended after Republicans in the House conceded on aviation security funding. The deal restored salaries for 140,000 DHS employees, but pointedly excluded any new appropriation for immigration and customs enforcement field operations. Roughly 1,400 ICE officers will remain on furlough indefinitely. While Washington exhaled, New York's new mayor, Zoran Mamdani, walked into City Hall and declared a budget emergency on his second day in office, citing a $6 billion gap created by federal aid clawbacks under the Trump rescission package. And in Tallahassee, Florida's legislature pushed through a mid-cycle redistricting plan that adds 2 new Republican-leaning congressional seats and dilutes 3 African-American majority districts in Tampa, Jacksonville, and Miami. The Department of Justice, under new leadership, declined to challenge the map. The civil rights lawsuits will run for years. The maps will run for the entire decade. Constitutional scholars across both parties privately agree that the new district lines will not survive in court, but they will survive long enough to deliver 2 cycles of midterms and 1 redrawn Senate map. That is, in the brutal arithmetic of American politics, the only number that matters today. Fifth story. Veteran intelligence analyst Yuri Shvets, speaking on his weekly podcast, reported that British Secret Intelligence Service contacts in London are quietly briefing senior allies that the Russian Federation may not survive in its current borders past 2027. Shvets, formerly of the KGB First Chief Directorate, attributed the assessment to specific names inside the British defense intelligence community. The thesis is that the Russian imperial model only functions while the federal center can pay regional governors more than the regional economies can pay them, and that Russia's hydrocarbon revenue is now structurally insufficient to maintain that balance. If the British assessment is accurate, the financial consequence for American banks is enormous. Several major American banks still hold roughly $400 billion in indirect exposure to Russian counterparties through Cyprus, the United Arab Emirates, and Hong Kong. A managed Russian decomposition would force a 40-cent on the dollar haircut on those positions, the same scale of write-down banks accepted in 1998 after the Russian default. Watch this space because the financial markets are already starting to price it in. Add to that the fact that Russian sovereign debt is no longer trading at any reasonable spread, and you start to understand why the Federal Reserve has been holding emergency liquidity lines open with the European Central Bank for the last 3 weeks. Nobody wants a repeat of the autumn of 1998, and Washington has been preparing the backstop since February. Thank you for staying with me right to the end. If today's stories were useful, please tap the like button and subscribe to the channel, because the YouTube algorithm only pushes this video to more viewers when you take half a second to react. Tell me in the comments which of the 5 stories hit hardest for you and which American state you are reading from, because I read every comment in the first 48 hours and I reply to as many as I can. If you have the means, please consider supporting the channel through super thanks or sponsorship, because that money pays for the document reading, the cross-language fact-checking, and the editorial independence that lets me cover stories without partisan strings. Independent reporting is hours of paperwork and miles of patience, and your support is what keeps this show standing on its own. See you tomorrow morning. Take care of yourselves and the people you love.